Hello, welcome to the third video in our series. If you haven't watched the first two, I'd go and do that first. This video is going to cover dynamic processing. So gating is a type of dynamic processing, but we'll look at that in another video. Today we're looking at compressors and limiters, which are very similar in what they do, but a limiter is essentially just a hardcore compressor. So dynamic processing can be used for a lot of different things. Kind of adding vibe to a track by kind of giving it an analog vintage style compression, by helping things sync into a mix, by kind of beefing up a drum bus. But for our particular context, we won't be using it for that kind of thing. We'll be using it for what it was really designed for, compression, what the kind of purpose of it is, and that is making the loudest bits quieter, so that you have more control over level. So a good example of when you could use a compressor, I was watching a movie the other night and I had to keep on turning it up, reaching for the remote and turning it up in all the quiet dialogue parts. And then maybe the next scene's like a fight scene that's really loud and I have to turn things down. So if I had a compressor hooked up to my TV, which wouldn't be a bad idea actually, it would basically do that job for me. It would automate the volume control, so it would bring all the loudest bits, the explosion, the fight scenes, down a bit, so that it's closer in level to the quieter speech parts, and then what you do is actually bring the whole volume up a bit, just so the quieter bits are louder. So that's similar to what we'd use it for in a context with live sound. So we use it to help control volume of instruments and vocals with too much dynamic range. So for example, in a verse of a song, when Ian's maybe singing and it's a nice balance in the verse, and then it gets to the chorus and he switches to a high harmony that he's really belting out, and you have to reach for your slider and bring it down. So you could use compression to help you with that. Or on guitar, the difference between a finger picked part and a real hard strum part will be massively different in terms of dynamics. And actually a very good one for our context is a pastor's mic. So compressors and limiters can be really useful for a preacher who's particularly shouty. When we talk about dynamics, we're talking about the range between quiet and loud sounds. Dynamics are good. They are something that we can battle with, but they are massively important for music, particularly worship music, where you have lots of dynamics. You have quiet verses and big builds, and you want to keep that. You don't want to squish it, so that there's less dynamics. So compression can be good or bad, depending on how it's used. So let's start with limiting. Limiting is basically a brick wall, and once you set the level of the threshold of the brick wall of the limiter, nothing will be able to get past it. So the limiter on PreSonus just has one control. I'll show it to you here. Once your audio reaches that threshold, it'll be turned down there. So I would basically use this as insurance against clipping or distortion. So I'll give you an example here. So say if your master bus was kind of getting into the red, which it shouldn't be. Your faders shouldn't be that high where your master channel is going into the red and distorting. But say if it was, or there was a risk of that happening, I'll give you an example here. So this is with the limiter off here. In this, by the way, this is my threshold control here, but it's off at the minute, so let's hear.
We ain't seen nothing yet. You left a mark in my heart, so that I can't forget.
So you can see here it's going way into the red, 2.5 peaking. So say we turn this on and put it down to -1.
We ain't seen nothing yet. You left a mark in my heart.
So nothing's going to go above 0 there. It's all going to stay safely inside that -1. So I would turn this on in pretty much every channel. Hopefully you won't need it, but it's there to protect against clipping if you do need it. Okay, so a couple of examples of limiting here. I have a couple of waveforms of bounces that I've done. So this is a mix that is far too hot, it's too loud, it's clipping. You can say there's no limiting done on this at all. It's going past -1 and into 0, and you can see these here are will be clipping. So play some of this.
And so we lift you high. You are the wonder working savior of my life.
Okay, so the second one here has a limiter applied. Okay, so I think this limiter was set to -1. So it's the same audio, it just isn't going to be going over that limit.
Raised up high, you're coming back in glory. And so we lift you high. You are the wonder working savior of my life.
Okay, and the third one, this is an example of whenever audio is pushed really hard into a limiter. So if it was already going to be clipping loads and you've put a limiter on there, this is a limiter set to -2, but the audio has just been pushed way too hard in it. You can see how it's totally just been squished.
You were raised up high, you're coming back in glory. And so we lift you high. You are the wonder working savior of.
So it sounds horrible there. It sounds really that's just an example of a really compressed awful sound. So if you think of limiting a bit like a brick wall, if you're driving your car slowly into a brick wall, there's going to be some minor dents, but if you're going at 90 and driving into a brick wall, your car is going to be squished. It's the same with audio. If it's already going too hot and too loud, then it's just going to be totally squished if you put a limiter on there. So a compressor does the same job as a limiter, but kind of in a more natural sounding way. Compressors, instead of acting like that brick wall, they'll let some of the peaks through, some of the loudest peaks of the audio through, but it will reduce the levels of some of the peaks. So this is the compressor in the PreSonus unit, and this is the one that I'll be using just to demonstrate. It has all the same controls, and this graph is a main feature of the PreSonus one, so we'll be looking at this a lot. Like a limiter, you have a threshold control that sets where it's going to be, where the level is going to get to before it's compressed. And instead of hitting a brick wall like a limiter, you basically will be reducing the level by a ratio. So this is set to 2:1. So for every 2 dB above the threshold, 1 dB will be outputted. So for example, if the ratio is 2:1 and the level goes 10 dB over the threshold, then there will be a 5 dB gain reduction. So looking at our graph here, the x-axis here is the audio, the level coming in to the compressor, and the y-axis is the level going out. You'll see as I change this ratio, if I put it 1:1 is no compression, 1:10 is quite hard compression, so there'll be a lot of gain reduction there. And if I put that up to even further than 30, if it was infinity to 1 and that was completely straight, that would be just a limiter. So you can see if that was 30:1 and I have my threshold at 20 and audio comes in at say -1, it would be flattened out to nearly -20 there. So that would be nearly a brick wall limiter with that compression setting. So your main controls you're paying attention to on your limiter are the threshold and the ratio. And other controls on there are gain, or sometimes it's called makeup gain. We don't really want to be using that. If you just leave that one at 0, because it can cause a bit of distortion. It's hard to figure out where that distortion is coming from sometimes. And then your other controls are the attack and release And the attack basically sets how quickly the compressor engages when the threshold is passed, and the release is how quickly it's released from being active. So don't worry too much about the release time, but for our attack time, most of the time for what the purposes we're using our compressor for, we want it to be quite low, so somewhere between 0 and 5 milliseconds will be good. So we use a compressor to control a signal that has too large a dynamic range, and basically we bring down the level of the peaks and then turn the whole thing up a little bit so that it's not peaking and the quieter bits are a bit louder. So for a more natural sound, we want to go for a higher threshold and a lower ratio, as you can see here. And if the source is extremely varied in dynamics, then you want to increase that ratio. Okay, so I've recorded myself imitating a shouty preacher, where I am whispering 1 minute and then shouting the next, and this is the audio example here. Just be aware I will be shouting at the end, so don't turn your headphones up too much. So this is it without compression.
1, 2, this is me speaking at a normal level. 1, 2, this is me speaking quietly. 1, 2, this is me getting very excited. 1.
Okay, and you can see it goes quite high here. So what I did was I applied a compressor with a ratio of 4:1 and a threshold of -20, and you can see the peaks here. This is the compressed version, so the peaks here have been brought down, but the quiet bit and the normal bit are the same level between the two. So this is the compressed version.
1, 2, this is me speaking at a normal level. 1, 2, this is me speaking quietly. 1, 2, this is me getting very excited.
Okay, and then the third version here is the exact same compression, except I've just turned everything up a bit so that our quiet bit is louder. This is the first. This is the compressed and turned up version, so everything's a bit louder and this is compressed a bit more. So let's listen to that.
1, 2, this is me speaking at a normal level. 1, 2, this is me speaking quietly. 1, 2, this is me getting very excited.
Okay, and then I've kind of gone to the extreme end, which probably doesn't sound. This would be too much. This is a compression of 20:1 and a threshold of -30. So you can see there that there's hardly any difference between me shouting in the waveform to me talking normally. So just to compare, this is with no compression, and this is -20. Or this is 20:1 compression. So let's listen to that.
1, 2, this is me speaking at a normal level. 1, 2, this is me speaking quietly. 1, 2, this is me getting very excited.
Okay, and then I've done the same thing with this one where I've gained it all up to where it's all loud, and this will just sound pretty horrible and obviously compressed. So if you had this kind of compression on a vocal or a pastor's mic, it will be too much, and this is what it sounds like, particularly at the end. You'll hear it.
1, 2, this is me speaking at a normal level. 1, 2, this is me speaking quietly. 1, 2, this is me getting very excited.
Okay, so hopefully you can kind of hear that sound of compression when it's good and when it's too much, and seeing it there in the waveforms, you can really see how the compressor acts. So compression can be a confusing thing, so don't worry if the first time you listen to that it was a bit over your head. Go back, maybe have a listen through this a couple of times. If you have any questions, sure, let me know. If in doubt, don't add compression to a channel, because you could end up adding too much and then it just will sound worse. But ideally we'll have compressor settings on channels on the PreSonus system already, and all you have to do between weeks is maybe tweak them slightly. But it's good to be able to know what you should be listening for. And compression and dynamic effects are actually sometimes quite hard to hear. They're a lot less obvious than EQ and that kind of thing. So play around with it in band practice, especially just to see if you can hear the difference. And yeah, I hope you get on well with it.